the vibration of this Chaitanya Charan. So, Guruji is known throughout the world for profound, deep explanations on Shastra. And I think there's so much to be said, but one thing I really appreciate is how the Shastras explain that one of the elements of speaking about Shastra is resolving doubts and apparent conflicts that one may encounter in Shastra. And Guruji does that in such a wonderful manner. It not only resolves a doubt, but it takes us to a higher level of consciousness and realization of the relationship with Krishna. And just like you mentioned in the writings, how Srila Prabhupada used bhakti in every section of Gita and Karma Yoga, Karma, and etc. All things and further always going to require wonderful explanations. So Prabhuji is well known for his website, Gita Daily, spiritual sites. I encourage those of you that have not looked at it to take a look, especially the youth. There are a lot of youth, I think, that are attracted to it for its explanations of how you fit Krishna consciousness into the modern world and thinking, for example. So those of you who are in high school or college, basically, help yourselves understand the concept of Krishna consciousness, how you can fit. So without further ado, please enlighten us for Hare Krishna.
Sometimes the mic can be too humble. What do we do? Maybe just, it can't pull. Just pull spread like that, but no. Let's leave it. Okay, thank you. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjalishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Vishnupeshtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshikari Vancha Kalpataru Yascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavalebhyo Vaishnavedhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I apologize for getting a little late and grateful to be here with all of you. Thank you, Chaitanya, for that introduction. As far as I can remember, every time I have come here, you always found some new point to appreciate about me while introducing me. I can safely say that your association is dangerous for my ego. So, I have been discussing on this topic of free will and destiny. And today we will go into the heart of this topic by comparing two characters in the Mahabharata. There's Karna and Arjuna. So those of you who are not there for the previous classes, you can still catch with what we are discussing. How many of you were there for the previous two classes? Oh, significant number. So basically, it's a 6-part series I'm doing. In the first session, I talked about, does God control everything? And the second session was, how free is our free will? So based on those topics, today we will look at these two characters. And wherever it's required, I'll recap the core points from the previous sessions. So those who are not there won't miss much. In our life, we all have certain starting points that we begin with. So let's consider. Yeah. So we'll discuss here. This is when bad things happen to good people. So our discussion is destiny and free will. So bad thing happen is destiny, and how people respond, that is the free will. So here in the Mahabharata is often a complex book because it involves moral complexity. It's not that the characters on one side are all good and the characters on the other side all bad. There are good characters even on the bad side. On the Kaurava side, who are the prominent good characters? Bhishma is one, then Drona is one. Karna, that's also good. Yeah. And in fact, in many ways, we can say Karna is also a heroic character. So many times Karna is seen as a person who was wronged against, and we will discuss about that. But if we look at the broader story of the Mahabharata, we'll find that both Karna and Arjuna had to deal with a difficult life. They had a difficult past. So sometimes it just seemed that Karna had life was so stacked against him, life was so unfair, which is true, but at a broader level, life is not fair to anyone from this life's perspective. Even if somebody is born in a very wealthy family, but there are always people who are born in wealthier families, and this person feels, oh, I was not born over there. So there is justice and there is just is. This is how life just is. So we need to understand this. So this is a broad subject which I will not go into, but a quick overview of this. When we understand the epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, at a literal level, we just enjoy the story. Oh, it's for entertainment. Like there are Ramayana TV serials, there are Mahabharata TV serials. Even nowadays, the Purana, the Bhagavatam story is also being told. So just some nice entertainment. That's one level. Okay, at least some connection with the stories are there. Then these stories can be approached at the ethical level, where we learn how to choose wisely, how to act morally from these stories. And these are, at this level, they offer us moral edification. Then some of these stories, or at least some aspects of these stories, can be seen metaphorically. So, for example, if you read the Ramayana, then Ravan is not just a person. He's certainly a person, but he is also a principle. The principle of selfishness, the principle of destructive selfish craving that is often referred to as lust, and that is present in everyone. So at the metaphorical level, we see universal principles in action in the epics, and then we get intellectual inspiration. Okay, this is what this means, and this can be very stimulating at an intellectual level to see things metaphorically. And beyond that, there's a transcendental level. So Madhvacharya in his Vedanta Sutra commentary talks about various levels like this. And this approach has been used even by Acharya Vishwanath Thakur and others while approaching the epics. And the highest level is the transcendental level, which may seem very much like the literal level, where we're just enjoying the story. But the difference is, at a transcendental level, we fully understand that this is God, this is the Supreme Lord, and we are relishing His pastime and become immersed in love for Him. So that does not happen at the literal level. At the literal level, somebody may watch a movie or TV series centered on the Lord, and when that series ends, they may just turn it off and turn on Star Wars, and they may experience the same emotions that they experience over. So what is happening is there's nothing transcendental. So the literal and the transcendental can appear similar, but there's a world of difference. And at the transcendental level, the effect is that we develop pure devotion. So based on what I spoke before I showed this table, which level do you think we are going to discuss? Transcendental? Metaphorical? Sorry? Metaphorical, yes. Well, you give all the answers. Yeah, we're going to discuss at the ethical level. We discuss what is the right action, what is the wrong action, who acted how. So we are focusing on the ethical level. Of course, some elements of the others will also come in, transcendental, metaphorical. So let's look at it. So we all have destiny as something that determines our starting condition. Let's look at it. I'll explain a little more clearly what destiny means. See, when bad things happen to good people, what do we do? Or what do good people do? There's a common saying that hurt people hurt people. People who are hurt act and speak in ways that hurt others. But all that it just leads to is a parampara of hurt. Just one person, one generation keeps hurting another generation, keeps hurting another generation. That's how sometimes dynastic feuds and dynastic wars happen. So we all may be hurt, but that does not give us the right to hurt others. Can we stop this cycle? Can we stop a cycle? It's more of a chain rather than a cycle. Say if I'm just standing and somebody steps on my foot, and because I feel so much pain, I might just push. Now my pushing is just a reflex action to protect myself. But that person gets angry. How dare you push me? And they punch me. And they punch me, then I take out a knife and stab them. And somebody from their side comes and takes out a gun. And somebody from our side comes out and takes a machine gun. And somebody from their side comes with a bomb. So that's how things can escalate. If we let our hurt alone determine our actions, then we simply create a terrible tradition of hurt going on and on and on. So what happens is we need to stop that. And we'll see that life will hurt everyone. And in one sense, how do we see the hurts that life gives us? And how do we deal with them? That is where our understanding of destiny and our understanding of free will come. Just give this example. So these hurts can keep escalating endlessly. Generations of feudal wars can also result in this. So now Karna as a character, there are two views of him. One is that he's a wronged hero. That means he was subjected to injustice. He was always treated unfairly. And at the end of it, he was killed unfairly. That's one view. And the other view is that Karna is a wrong hero. Wrong hero means he had heroic characteristics, but he made incorrect. And not just incorrect, even disastrous choices. So we'll look at both these perspectives and try to understand which perspective is more in harmony with what the Mahabharata narrates. If we consider so quite often when the story of Karna comes through, Karna is contrasted with Arjuna because they were peers and they were rivals. And what happened was that eventually Arjuna turned out victorious. And it does seem as if destiny favored Arjuna. So often Karna is seen as the emblem of somebody who is victimized by life, who tries to rise against victimization, but is still unfairly victimized. And on top of that, the caste narrative has added to it. India is often seen as a place, this terrible discriminatory caste system. Well, we'll talk about that a little later, what it is and what it is not. But because of this, which narrative is more popular whenever the Mahabharata is read, the first or the second? The wronged hero or the wrong hero? Yes, he's seen as the wrong hero. The Bhakti tradition explains that he is the wrong hero. And personally, for me, I had read the Mahabharata several times before I was introduced to Bhakti. I've watched it also. So this understanding the Bhakti tradition's view of Karna took a long time for me. It just is too close to me personally. So Karna, if any of you see the TV serials, he was often referred to as a Suta Putra. Suta is one of the lower castes, and that was used many times as a slur by his enemies. So that seems so discriminatory at times. See, when we are held responsible for something that is not in our control, that is especially painful. Now, if we made some mistake and then we are held responsible for that, that's also painful, but not that painful. Okay, I did something wrong. But in which family somebody is born, that is not in our control, at least not from this life's perspective. But to be held responsible for that, that was very difficult. Some of you may notice that I need to use crutches for walking. So since my childhood, there were always kids in school who would always tease me by calling me lame. In Hindi, the word is langda. So whenever I would hear somebody use that word, Suta Putra to Karna, I could empathize very much with it. So in that sense, for me to actually see that Karna was wrong, because when we empathize with a particular character, we naturally start thinking that character must be right. We don't see the flaws in that character. So it took me a lot of time to actually see the validity of the Bhakti tradition's perspective of Karna as not just a wrong hero. Yes, he was wrong, but then everyone is wrong in life. And even Arjuna was wrong in life. Somehow that part is not highlighted much. So we'll see how much we can complete today. This presentation will continue later on also. Let's compare the upbringing. Now, those of us who know the story, see, I'll be talking about principles which are universal. So even those of you who may not know about the story, I'll describe the story briefly. But the principles, independent of the story, are relevant to everyone. So Karna was born to Kunti before she got married. So because of the social stigma associated with such a child, Kunti sent her child away. Now, she didn't just abandon her child. She actually put the child in a very costly wooden boat, and she put very precious jewels and precious garments over there. And she prayed to the wind god and the sun god, please guide this child to a good set of parents. So she was situationally helpless, but she did what she could in that situation. She put these precious things so that whoever got that child, they would understand that actually this child is belonging to some elite family, and then hopefully take care of the child. So, but later on, Karna grew up. He was born in a royal family. He was a Kshatriya, but he never got the respect of being a Kshatriya. And that was seen as very discriminatory for him, very unfair. And that is true. No doubt about it. But let's compare Arjuna's child. What happened to Arjuna? He was also born in a royal family. He was the son of Pandu. But when he was born, Pandu had been retired. Pandu had chosen to retire. He had gone to the forest. And then when Arjuna was still very young, his father passed. And then suddenly he was almost like orphan. His mother was there, but she alone couldn't take care of the children, especially in the forest. So they came back to him. And what happened was, in his upbringing, his early upbringing till his teens, he had no royal security or comfort because he was living in the forest. And after that, twice he had to go to the forest again. Once when their house was burnt in Varnava, and later on when they were exiled. So how much royal comfort and royal luxury or even royal security did Arjuna enjoy? As compared to Arjuna, Karna didn't have to live in the forest even once. So, yes, what wrong did Arjuna have done? Had Arjuna done to be deprived of royal comfort? So one did not get the royal name, the other did not rarely got royal comfort or even as a royal security. Other point we compare is that Karna, he grew up, his foster parents loved him, and he grew up in a safe, secure environment. But the Pandavas, when they came back to the Kuru kingdom, what happened was they became the targets of the envy of the. Because when the Pandu had retired to the forest, most people thought that Pandu will not have a child also. He had a curse because of which he could not have children by now. So when Gandhari and Dhritarashtra had a child, that child, who was that child? Duryodhana. Duryodhana grew up with an entitlement mentality. This kingdom is meant to be mine. And suddenly his cousins came back and they became a threat for him. He felt they were a threat, although they were not a threat for him. And he started tormenting. So he tried to poison them, he tried to burn them. We just hear these incidents, or they try to poison, try to burn, but we often don't contemplate the ramifications, the consequences, the psychological impact. Eating food and relaxing in our home. These are the two of the most secure, comforting activities that we do. Now, I had a friend who works in national security in India, and he was once poisoned. He survived, but he says, now every time I try to eat food, I get a tinge of apprehension. So to be poisoned, it leaves lifelong psychological scars if one survives poison. So, and similarly, to be burned in your own house, not just burned in your house, to have your entire house burnt. So where was the security? So if you really want to look at difficult childhood, whose childhood was more difficult? Was it Arjuna's or was it Karna's? Well, I didn't want to force you to give that answer, but at the very least, we can say that Arjuna's childhood was no walk in the park. It's also tough. Now we could say Karna's childhood was tough because he didn't get the honor of a royal person. Well, okay, but how much does a child even understand that I belong to royalty and I don't get that. I don't get that privilege. Actually, Karna started feeling that only when he developed his archery skills and he was not allowed to be an archer or a warrior. So that was when. So as far as childhood is concerned, we could say Karna's childhood was far better than Arjuna's. So now what happens is we are talking about the topic of destiny and free will. So broadly, we can say destiny determines our situations, but we determine our decisions. Destiny determines what? Our situations. What kind of circumstances we face in our life. That's determined by destiny. But what we do in those circumstances, that is up to us. So by destiny, both Arjuna and Karna faced difficulties. Let's now see what were the decisions that they made, how they acted in their lives. Any questions at this point? Okay. So generally, when this topic of destiny comes up, I'm talking about destiny right now from a more historical perspective of the epics. We'll talk about destiny from a more philosophical perspective also in due course. But let's keep it at this point that we all have done some karma. And that karma from the past determines the situations in our present. So destiny is what? Destiny is the stockpile of karma from our past, which determines our situations in the present. So, yes, bro. Okay. So why did sun god not take any responsibility? Yeah, that's a good question. That's there we need to go to the previous life. So that's described in the Mahabharata that Karna was a. See, generally, when I'm talking about these stories, I don't like to go too much into previous lives because that just we are discussing about fairness and unfairness from this perspective and responsibility from this perspective. And since you raised the question, Karna was in his previous life a demon named Sahasra Kavacha. He was a demon who had 1,000 armors around his body. And he had a blessing by which those armors were extremely difficult to destroy. So Naranarayan Rishi. So the vow was the blessing that he had was that if anyone would destroy one armor, that person would almost like die. So Nara and Narayan both attacked. And what they did was they worked together. So when one of them would attack and destroy one armor, that person would fall almost like dead. And the second would perform austerities to revive the first, and then the second would attack. And then the second would fall like dead, and the first would revive, and like that, they fought and fought. They destroyed 999 of his kavachas. But then he realized, he was thinking, nothing is going to happen to me. They will get tired. But when he had only one kavach, he panicked and he fled. And he fled to Suryadev, to the god of the sun, and he took shelter. He says, please give me shelter. Suryadev didn't want to give him shelter. But on the other hand, he felt that he's asked me for shelter. I cannot refuse. So that's how he was under Suryadev's shelter. And then when Narayan came, they said that. He said, I cannot let him be destroyed while he's in my shelter. So then, when Kunti offered prayers, she chanted the mantra to invoke the sun god. At that time, in one sense, Suryadev had this demon whom he wanted to get rid of. So he gave that as a child to Kunti. And because 999 of his armors were destroyed, natural armors, one was remaining. So Karna was born with a kavach. So that's what's Karna. So Karna, what happened? There was a demoniac aspect to him. He was a demon, but then he also stayed for some time with Suryadev, and because of that, he also developed some godly qualities. That's how he's born. So now Suryadev felt that this is a demon. I just wanted to get rid of him. So that's how he just, with Kunti, she didn't realize what she was doing when she was chanting the mantra, and then she got a child there. Okay, so now, see, all of us in our lives, we face certain situations. And in one sense, at every moment, we are making choices. But there are certain choices that are far more consequential than others. So both Arjuna and Karna faced such choice points. And at those choice points, what do we do? It shapes our life dramatically. So by destiny, both of them were in difficult situations. That Arjuna was living in a palace where other members of the palace, far more influential members of the palace, that is Duryodhana, who had been there. Dhritarashtra was the acting head of state, acting king. So the royal support was always on Duryodhana's side. So Arjuna was always under danger. And Karna was living a life as a charioteer's son, not a particularly privileged life. Now, both of them had a special talent. What was their talent? Archery. And both of them sought gurus and learned from their gurus. So, who was Karna's guru? Parashurama. And who was Arjuna's guru? Drona. Yes. And both of them excelled by learning. And then, for both of them, what happened was they formed an alliance. They formed a friendship. And that friend, till this point, in both of them, we could say, let's stop this for time. Both of them, till this point, had risen from difficult situations. They had difficulties, but they rose. Their sheer archery talent and their dedication to using that talent, to developing that talent, meant that both became great archers. But this is where the similarities of their trajectory starts ending. They both had one fateful meeting each. Whose was Karna's fateful meeting with Duryodhana? And whose was Arjuna's fateful meeting with Krishna? Yes. So let's discuss these two meetings. So Karna's meeting with Duryodhana, in one sense, happened a little earlier. There was this martial exhibition. In those days, the royal princes, when they would get trained, they were going to become successors. But you can have a king being made by succession, but you cannot automatically transfer faith from the previous king to the next king. Faith cannot be legislated. Faith has to be inspired. And how is the faith inspired? When the citizens see that these leaders, that these successors, they are competent, they are capable of protecting us. So the martial exhibition was arranged by Drona primarily for his students, the Kurus, to display their skills to the Kuru citizens, so that they could see that these are going to be our future rulers, and just see how competent they are. Now, of course, Drona's Gurukul had grown hugely, so there were princes from other kingdoms also, and there were representatives from other kingdoms also. But this was primarily like a graduation ceremony of a particular university for its own students. And there it was, Arjuna exhibited such skills. His capacity to wield a bow and arrow was magical. Everyone was stunned. Everyone was applauding. And at that time, suddenly, stop! They heard a thunderous voice. Whenever we look at the martial exhibition, there's like a stadium and there was a door over there. They saw imposing, majestic figure. He says, I can do everything that Partha has done, and I can do it better. Who was this person? Karna. And he came forward marching. Everyone stopped. Who is this unknown person? And then it was intriguing. And he just looked at Drona. Almost cursorily, he bowed down to him. He says, do I have the permission? Drona said yes. Drona just nodded his head. He didn't say yes. Just nodded. And he started exhibiting all his skills. And it was fantastic. He exerted himself fully, and he equaled Arjuna. But no matter what he tried, he just couldn't exceed Arjuna, as he had said he would do. So then he said, can I have a direct duel with Arjuna? Now Arjuna was already annoyed. This was like his graduation ceremony. It was his moment. And who was that upstart who had come? He said, I will teach him a lesson. So Arjuna immediately picked up his bow, grabbed his bow and raised it. And at that time, Krupacharya was the assistant of Dronacharya. He intervened. He says, before there can be a duel between two warriors, we need to know their antecedents. So everyone knows the antecedents, the illustrious lineage of Arjuna. Can you, oh warrior, tell your lineage? And now this may seem very casteist or such important the genealogy, but it's not just like that. It's like, say, suppose right now I think the Wimbledon tournament is going on, and the Wimbledon final is going on. Suddenly some player comes and says, no, I want to challenge the champion. Well, who are you? Where are you from? What is your ranking? What competition have you played? What is your qualification to be here to challenge the champion? Somebody says, I have the talent. Well, that's fine. But still, there is a structure, there is a system. So Karna's head dropped when this question was asked. And at this point, Duryodhan came forward. And Duryodhan seems to give a very egalitarian anti-casteist speech. He says, who here can say that this great warrior is not born of warriors? Can you not see his prowess? Can you not see his skill? Can a lion ever be born of lambs? This is a lion, he must be born of lions. But nonetheless, if you consider that he is not a Kshatriya, he is not a warrior, I will make him a warrior. He says, I will make him a king of Anga. And he called his servants, and right over there, they got sanctified water, poured it on Karna's head. And he was proclaimed the king of Anga. Karna was enormously touched. He says, you have saved my honor today. How can I ever repay this debt? Duryodhan was an expert politician. So he, whatever we can say, sometimes just nominally say Duryodhan had 100 brothers. Now, anybody who has 1 or 2 brothers, try to get your brothers to obey you. It's a very difficult task. He had 99 brothers, and he got all of them to obey. How was it? You may say that ethos, it was you people obeyed their ultimate. That's true. That might be true, but still, this was not just obedience, they were completely devoted to him. When Duryodhana wanted, he could seem to be not like this good guy, but the best among all good guys. The problem was that he usually had some sinister motives. So here, he gave this stirring speech. And when Karna asked him, how can I repay? He said, I only want your friendship. If Karna has heart had been touched till earlier, now it is completely one, his soul overexist. That you will have till my last breath. And Karna didn't realize how costly this promise would prove for him. So now what happened was, Duryodhana actually had no real affection for Karna. And that was seen later when Karna often gave suggestions to Duryodhana. Why are you using all these schemes, backhanded schemes to try to knock down the Pandavas? Just challenge them for a fight, we'll defeat them. So Duryodhana paid not the slightest attention to the suggestions of Karna. For Duryodhana, he had been growing in the academy, the Gurukula of Drona. And what had happened was, he had seen how powerful the Pandavas were. He felt, I can deal with Bhima, but I need someone to deal with Arjuna. And when he saw Karna exhibiting his skills, he felt this was the answer. He had not made any prayers, but this was the answer for him. This was his need being fulfilled. So for him, Duryodhana was not interested in Karna per se. Duryodhana was only interested in what Karna could do for him. And for that, he ingratiated himself to Karna. And at this point, we can say that maybe Karna didn't have any idea about Duryodhana's nefarious intentions. For him, Duryodhana just did a big favor. And to be grateful to someone who has done a big favor for us, that is wonderful. So this is how this alliance formed. But something happened terrible after this. That while Karna got his need fulfilled, Karna wanted to be respected as royalty. And now he was royalty. But still, what happened was, the person who had given him that royalty was Duryodhana. So he just wanted to be with Duryodhana and wanted to belong in his inner circle. And Duryodhana's envy and vicious scheming nature repeatedly collided with Karna's virtuous nature. But over a period of time, Karna's, we could say, his wants overpowered his values. His want was he wanted to belong to Duryodhana. His values, he was virtuous, but his wants overpowered his values. And what happened was, initially when Duryodhana was making any evil schemes, Karna would of course don't do this, but he was neglected. Then eventually started going along with Duryodhana's schemes. And after some time, not only did he go along, he actually went further. It's just like if some children go to school, some kids go to college, and say in the college, everybody is maybe drinking or doing something like that. And the one kid says, I'll not do this, I'll not do this, I'll not do this. But what happens is they want to belong to some group over there. And just to belong to that group, what may happen is they will start doing those things. Not because they like to, not because they want to, it's because of that need for belonging. So Karna had that need for belonging. Karna is a classic example, classic and tragic example of how a good person becomes spoiled by bad association. And this, somebody said Karna was never spoiled. Karna was always virtuous. Karna was always charitable. Well, yes, he was always charitable. That we'll discuss later if we get time. But what happened? Karna's worst moment came when the gambling match was going on. That was the time when it was Karna who suggested, now that Draupadi has been won over, now that she is your maid servant, let us disrobe her. Let us drag her in public and disrobe her. Now, Duryodhana pounced on that suggestion. If Karna so much wanted to be a Kshatriya, then here would have been offered to opportunity to actually be a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is meant to be a protector, not a predator. Unfortunately, in associating with a predator like Duryodhana, Karna also became a predator. Of course, to his credit, Karna expressed regret for what he had done twice. Once to Bhishma and once to Krishna. So at that time, I did something. I should not have acted the way I did in that assembly. Duryodhana, on the other hand, never expressed any regret for what he had done. So the point was that both of them, Karna and Arjuna, were similar trajectory. But this particular association, what it did to Karna was it started dragging him down. On the other hand, does anyone know when Arjuna and Krishna met for the first time? Yes, thank you. Draupadi's Swayamvar. So at Draupadi's Swayamvar, all the great kings had come, but Krishna had told all the Yadus, Draupadi is destined to be with Arjuna. So none of you should compete. None of us will compete for her. So they were there, but they were just like, so Swayamvar was not just at that time, just the ceremony for choosing for a princess to choose her bride, her groom. It was also like a festive occasion, a celebration. It was like a get together of the elite of the world, the warriors of the world. So when Arjuna finally came forward and picked the target, so Krishna looked at Balram and says, "You see, you recognize who that is?" Balram said, "Brahmana? No, I don't know. Is that really a Brahmana?" Now, when Krishna spoke this to Balram, "Is that who I think you are saying he is?" He says, "Yes, that's Arjuna. He's alive." Both of them were so happy because the rumor was it all got burnt in the house of fire. Then after that, when Arjuna went with Draupadi back to the small house in which they were staying, in a Brahmana's house, small room. So Krishna and Balram followed. And then Krishna came up to Arjuna. He says, "Introduce, I am Krishna." So Arjuna said, "I know you already." That is not that here, the Mahabharata doesn't directly depend that Krishna is God. But he says, yeah, Krishna was a great hero. He was a Yadu hero. His heroics were known far and wide. So, and then that was the time when their friendship began. And when their friendship began, at that time, the fortunes change for them. See, for Arjuna, the alliance with Draupadi, that itself made them very influential. Now, they were not just orphan nephews of the Kuru king, they were the sons-in-law of a powerful rival king. And Duryodhana or Dhritarashtra couldn't just fool around with them. So they gave them half the kingdom. And then Krishna always was the well-wisher of his friend Arjuna. So Krishna arranged for Arjuna to marry Subhadra. So by that, what will happen is that even the Yadu powerful Yadu clan would ally with the Pandavas. And in this way, there are many occasions which we will not go into at this point, but the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna, it often checked Arjuna from acting impulsively. It enabled Arjuna to become stronger, not just physically stronger, but stronger in virtue. And now, on the Kurukshetra, before the war, what happened was both Karna and Arjuna met Krishna. Of course, we can say Arjuna was always with Krishna, but there was one fateful meeting that was between Karna and Krishna when Krishna went as the Shantidut. And there was a meeting or a discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, that was the Bhagavad Gita's discussion. And both of them faced similar ethical dilemmas. And that was the decisive choice. Karna refused to listen to Krishna's counsel, and Arjuna listened to Krishna's counsel. And that's what led to their varying destiny, their varying fates ultimately. So that part I'll discuss in the evening session. The meeting between Krishna and Karna and the meeting between Krishna and Arjuna. So Krishna and Arjuna was where they discussed the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna gave something similar instructions to Karna also, but Karna didn't listen to that. So 2 points I'd like to make here before we conclude and we can have some questions. First is that when bad things happen to us, in one sense, it's painful. Of course, it's painful because bad things are happening to us. But in other sense, it is not unexpected. If we understand this world is dukkhalaya. Now, what does it mean is dukkhalaya? What does the word dukkhalaya literally mean? Place of misery. Now, but what is the implication of that? The Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita could have said to Arjuna, Arjuna, you are in tears. This world is dukkhalaya. You are dukhi. Gita over. Arjuna and Krishna didn't do that. What did Krishna do? Krishna helped Arjuna to do something worthwhile amid the distresses that were facing. So let's compare this with the Himalayas. What is Himalaya? Meaning, what is the meaning of Himalaya? The place of snow. So now, if somebody goes to the Himalayas, it is expected that it is going to be cold. If somebody goes for trekking to the Himalayan mountains, high up, and they're oh, it's so cold, it's so cold, it's so cold, it's so cold. Well, somebody says, what's new? Then it's going to be cold. It's cold, that's old. That's old news. But the question is that all that is there in the Himalayas? Just cold, cold, cold? No. There is flora and fauna, there are beautiful natural sites, there is a thrill of climbing up mountains, there is a sense of adventure and achievement if one gets up to a mountain peak. All this is there in the Himalayas. But all this can be got only after one accepts this is going to be cold. If one is complaining, why is it so cold, so cold, so cold? They will not be able to perceive anything else. So similarly, when it is said that the world is dukkhalaya, the purpose of that statement is not that we all have to be miserable. The purpose is to reset our baseline expectation about the world. Life is going to be tough. Life is going to be tough. What next? Accepting that life is going to be difficult, accepting that there are going to be distresses in life, what can I do meaningful in life? What can I do worthwhile in life? Yeah, it's cold in the Himalayas, but is there something beautiful for me to see? Is there something worthwhile for me to do? So, The Bhagavad Gita, when it tells Arjuna this world is dukkhalaya, it doesn't mean that we all have to be miserable. It just means that we have to accept that misery is unavoidable. Unavoidable doesn't mean that it is something which is going to constantly befall us in the same degree, but it is going to come. But while facing misery, what is the something meaningful that we can do? What is sufficiently meaningful that can help us to tolerate and even transcend the misery? Suppose a mother has a newborn baby. Having a newborn baby means that there are so many sleepless nights. Normally, if we are sleeping peacefully and somebody wakes us up, we feel annoyed, we feel even angry. But when a newborn baby wakes the mother, the mother at times also feel annoyed. But there is something meaningful to do over there. Go take care of this baby. So what happens is, we cannot avoid misery in life, but we can find something meaningful to do that will make the misery bearable. And the Bhagavad Gita, in one sense, does not remove Arjuna's misery. It doesn't tell, oh, Arjuna, you don't want to fight against your own relatives. I'll cancel this war. Krishna doesn't do that. Krishna reveals a higher purpose, a more meaningful purpose. You are not just fighting to gain a kingdom. You are fighting to establish virtuous order in the world. Okay, for the world's welfare, I have to fight against my relatives. I can do it. So what the Gita does is, it reveals a bigger purpose for our life and helps us find the meaning that can make misery bearable. So now what happens is, what meaning do we find in our life depends to a significant degree on the kind of people we are with. What is the meaning that they are finding in life? So what happened with Karna and Arjuna? Both of them had difficulties. Both of them rose above difficulties. But unfortunately, what happened was, Karna tried to find meaning for his life in the association of Duryodhana. And Duryodhana's purpose of life was simply to gain a kingdom at all costs. On the other hand, Arjuna had the opportunity to be with Krishna. And Krishna, time and time again, reminded Arjuna of life's bigger purpose. And that's how Arjuna was able to find meaning in something higher. So when we face distresses in life, like I said, hurt people. How do we stop this chain? The way we stop this chain is by, if we don't transform our pain, we will transmit our pain. We transform our pain means, yes, this painful thing has happened to me, but what can I learn from it? How can I grow from it? How can I act in a way that I do something meaningful, something worthwhile? So that's how we transform our pain. So Arjuna had a terrible childhood, but Arjuna, he transformed his pain because he chose to live virtuously. But unfortunately, if we don't transform our pain, what happens is we transmit our pain. And that's how hurt people hurt people. So Karna could not transmit his pain. And it was not that he didn't have opportunities. We will discuss about the final opportunity, a remarkable opportunity that Krishna gave him. But he did not choose it. So was Karna treated unfairly by life? Well, yes. But Arjuna was also treated unfairly by life from this life's perspective. So what ruined Karna was not destiny, but his own decisions. Especially his decision to give up his values, including the supreme valuable Krishna, for the sake of Duryodhana. And that's what ruined him ultimately. So there is destiny and there are decisions. So our destiny determines our situations, but it is we with our free will determine our decisions. Ultimately, our future is determined not by where we came from, by what had happened to us, what our starting point was, but the decisions we make in this life. So we always have the free will to choose to either live on in our past hurts and feel that we are being virtuous while succumbing to the vices within us or the vices around us, going down the path of karma. Or we have the choice to go up the path of Arjuna. Come in the presence of Krishna and be guided and strengthened to act virtuously even when life treats us unfairly. So that is the choice which we all can make. And if we are practicing bhakti connected with Krishna, then we will all be inspired and empowered to choose like Arjuna. So I'll summarize. I spoke about 4 main points today. The first point was we talked about in the case of destiny and free will. We talked about how both Karna and Arjuna had difficult childhoods. Although Karna's childhood is highlighted, Karna's deprivation in his life is highlighted a lot. Because Arjuna also had a difficult childhood. Then the second point we discussed was both of them had a major meeting that changed their life. And Karna met with Duryodhana, and that time he didn't know about Duryodhana's evil intentions. But even when he came to know, instead of focusing on his values, he prioritized his trying to please Duryodhana, and that's how that bad association spoiled him. On the other hand, for Arjuna, he got a relation to, he connected with Krishna, and Krishna guided and elevated him repeatedly. And then the last decision, which we didn't discuss about, was that their final choice point, both of them met Krishna and they made their final choices. But the point which we last discussed is that distress comes on everyone. But it is for us to decide whether we simply transmit the pain or we transform the pain. We transform the pain by finding a meaningful purpose for our life that makes the distress bearable. So Krishna enabled, or Krishna helped Arjuna to find that. And Krishna was there to help Karna also to find that. Unfortunately, Karna chose not to. So when Karna was doomed, it was not by destiny, but by his own decisions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes, are there any questions? Yes, please. Okay.
I had a one question was that happen after Duryodhana made him the king? Or was that before?
It's before. At that time, he was still being trained, and he just nearly finished his training. At that time, Parshurama had taken a vow that he would not train the Kshatriyas because he had past experience of Kshatriyas becoming abusive. And Karna pretended to be a Brahmana because he thought Parshurama will teach Brahmanas. But when later on it was revealed that he was actually a Kshatriya, or he was not a Brahmana basically. That's what Parshurama understood. At that time, Parshurama said, "You have deceived me, so I curse you." Thank you. Yes, please.
Now, if he wouldn't have made those wrong choices, if he was not destined, was it destined first for my question? Was he destined to make those wrong choices? So he can be separated and that for Kurukshetra war, or was there anything else that he could have done where he could have like listened to Krishna and maybe that would have changed his destiny? But would that armor episode of the past one would have still labored on, or would have?
Okay, that's a good question. Actually, was Karna destined to be fight and be killed by Narayan? Could he have changed things? That's one of the sessions we're going to discuss. Is destiny changeable or not? But let's talk about this briefly. The first and most important thing is that we don't know in advance what destiny is. What we can know is what our duty is. What is the right thing for us to do? When Dhritarashtra was discussing with Vidura before the Kurukshetra war, Dhritarashtra is a character who is a study in self-created helplessness. Study in self-created helplessness. He was a powerful king, but what had happened was, by his attachment to Duryodhana, he had made himself powerless. He was on the throne, but he had given up his power to Duryodhana. Those of you who are from India, you may know that the previous government before the current government, there's one person on the chair and another person in power. So So that was the situation. Now, at least in that situation, because the person was in power, had put this person on the chair. But in this case, Dhritarashtra was already on the chair and he had put this person in power in spite of it. That was unfortunate. Anyway, the point is that when Vidura told him that stop this war, stop your son, otherwise the whole Kuru dynasty will be destroyed. So at that time, Dhritarashtra tried to justify his actions and said, if it is the will of Almighty destiny that our entire kingdom be destroyed, who am I, a tiny mortal, to stop the will of Almighty destiny? And Vidura just cut through his rationalization and said, okay, it is the consequences of our actions that are determined by destiny, not our actions themselves. This is a sentence worth memorizing. Can you repeat after me? It is the consequences of our actions that are determined by destiny, not our actions themselves. That means a student may study diligently for an exam, and maybe because of various reasons, the student may not do well in that exam. We may apply for an interview, may be well prepared, but somehow we may not get a job. But if a student doesn't study for the exam, and they say, it's my destiny to fail in the exam. It's not your destiny. If you fail in the exam, it's not because of your destiny, it's because of your responsibility. So our actions are not determined by destiny. Actually, he used the same argument, Dhritarashtra used the same argument against Vyasdev. See, what happens is, sometimes some people, they just ask the same question to 100 people. Why? Not sometimes just because they not got a clear understanding and they want a clear understanding. That case is genuine. But sometimes some person asks the same question to 100 people. Why? Because they are not looking for the answer. They are looking for the answer they want. So at least one person will give the answer I want, and then I'll accept that answer. There's a devotee who has written a book called How to Ruin Your Life with Astrology. Astrology can be a system for getting guidance. But if somebody goes to 15 astrologers, till we find an astrologer who tells us what we want to do, then we will just ruin ourselves. So anyway, what happened is, Dhritarashtra asked the same question to Vyasadeva. Isn't it destiny that this war is going to happen? Vyasadeva became very grave. Vyasadeva said, okay, none of us can know what destiny's plan is. But what we can know is our duty. So deliberate on what your duty is and act accordingly. So even when Karna, coming to a specific question, even when Karna's destiny, that he was supposed to die, he didn't have to support Duryodhana. He didn't have to die the way he had to die. He could have been died in some other way. The divine plan could have worked in some other way. But actually, it was Duryodhana had the audacity to antagonize the Pandavas primarily because of his faith in Karna. Now, he knew Drona and Bhishma were also supporting him, but he knew that they didn't really like him, and they certainly didn't hate the Pandavas. They didn't share his hatred for the Pandavas. So he knew who was really with me was Karna. If Karna had backed out, the whole war could have been avoided. Millions and millions of deaths could have been avoided. So we can't say that something has been destined when we know how it has happened after it. You have to see at that time, could this person have chosen? Yes, they could have chosen. Okay. Any other questions? There was a question. Yeah. Not necessarily. Your question is that he gave the word, then could he have gone back on the word later? Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, let's consider a parallel to understand this. Many of you know that in Pakistan and Afghanistan, see in the Islamic world, the Middle East is relatively quite wealthy. But Afghanistan and Pakistan, there's a lot of poverty. So there is a small innocent child who is growing over there. Is hungry. Maybe he's an orphan. He's struggling, and somebody offers that child food. The child offers him basically survival and an opportunity to grow. The child will naturally be grateful. But after that child grows up, the child says, these people who are actually helping me to take care of my terrorists. And they kill innocent people. And they're training me to become a terrorist. So the child at that time, he had made he said, oh, you saved my life. I'll serve you throughout my life. But does that mean when the child grows up, the child, just to honor that word which was given earlier, does the child have to become a terrorist who kills innocent people? Is our word that binding? So I have written an article, it's on my website, spiritualscience.com. See, Karna's choice was not just word of honor, or like honoring his word or failing to honor his word. Karna's choice was the word of honor or the life of honor. The word of honor. Gratitude is good. It's important if somebody has done something good for us to be grateful. But is gratitude the supreme virtue? Is gratitude a virtue so great that to be grateful we have to sacrifice all our other virtues? No virtue should ever be exalted to that level. Like humility is a very good virtue. But if we make humility the supreme virtue, then we may end up letting everyone else walk over us. Ultimately, for us as devotees, the supreme virtue is service to Krishna. And humility is meant to help us serve Krishna. So if I'm serving Krishna at the time of serving Krishna, if somebody disrespects me, I'll still keep serving Krishna. But if somebody stops me from serving Krishna, I say, I humbly will do whatever you say. No, then we have to stand up. So no virtue needs to be made ever the supreme virtue. So gratitude, or whether you could say internally his gratitude towards Duryodhana or externally his word of honor. Word of honor should also not be made the supreme value. And that is done, that can divert the person. So we need not just to be truly ethical. We don't just need to have moral values. We also need a moral framework in which we can place the values in a hierarchy. Which value is more important? Which value is less important? Suppose somebody says, I will always speak the truth. That's noble. But suppose there is a riot going on, and then our friend is being targeted by those riots because they belong to a particular ethnic group or whatever. And that friend comes and says, please save me. And we take that and we take that friend and we hide them in dungeon. And those rioters come and knock on the door. Is this person here? Should we speak the truth? Speaking truth is a good value. But we need to have a proper hierarchy of values. More important than being truthful is saving an innocent person's life. So in the case of Karna, yes, one's word of honor is an important value. But in honoring one's word, if one has to do dishonorable things, destructive things, then no, that word of honor is not that important. Okay? That's why I started by saying that the Mahabharata is a morally complex book. Because there are not just right and wrong. There are degrees of right, or hierarchies of right and hierarchies of wrong. So one has to make choice among them. Okay. Okay, the same thing applies to Bhishma. So I was expecting that point. So in the Bhishma, that is also true. Now, there is Bhishma as a character is presented in one way from the Mahabharata. It is presented in a different way from the Bhagavatam. And Mahabharata is focused on dharma. The Bhagavatam is focused on bhakti. So from the Mahabharata's perspective, what happens is that Bhishma, because of his word of honor, he sticks by the side of Duryodhana. Even when Duryodhana does something as terrible as trying to disrobe Draupadi, even then Bhishma stays silent. At least he doesn't vehemently oppose. And that is a failure on his part also. Now, from a devotional perspective, we understand that this was the arrangement of the Lord by which ultimately the Lord could demonstrate that No one can protect us except him. That's understood. But at that point, from the immediate situation's perspective, that was a failure on Bhishma's part. So there is the dharmic perspective and the bhakti perspective. From the dharmic perspective, Bhishma did make mistakes. Even his prioritizing his word of honor so much, and I will always be support the one who is ruling the Kuru. That was the word he had given to Shantanu, to Satyavati's father actually. It's a long war story. But the point is, he neglected the fact that the person who was ruling the Kuru kingdom didn't have the Kuru kingdom's best interest at heart. He didn't have to stick with it. So what the twin storylines highlight is different. The Mahabharata highlights how Bhishma also had to face the consequences of his actions. And among all the warriors of the Kuru battlefield, Bhishma had to face the most pain before death. We often say that Bhishma was just lying on an arrow bed. We use that word. But actually, arrow bed is the opposite of what is normally a bed. Normally, when we are on a bed, even if there is a small pointed thing, we just shift here and there, and somehow we try to find a place where we can comfortably sleep. But the arrow bed was filled with pointed things, sharp pointed things. And Bhishma was lying on that for several weeks, several days at least. So he did face severe pain. And from the dharmic perspective, that was a consequence of his failure to protect Draupadi. At the same time, the defining difference between Bhishma and Karna was that Bhishma was devoted to Krishna. So what happened was Krishna came finally before Bhishma and revealed Bhishma's glory to the world. Bhishma succeeded in instructing Yudhishthira, which Krishna himself had failed. And then Krishna heard from Bhishma, Krishna helped Bhishma depart successfully. So the point is that Krishna did not overlook Bhishma's mistakes just because he was a devotee. Mistakes at a material level will have consequences. If a devotee is going for distribution and a devotee drives recklessly, then the devotee cannot say, "Oh, I'm driving for Krishna's service." One of my devotee friends says that, if you drive above the speed limit, Krishna will use the car. So, if a person drives recklessly and they meet with an accident, they say, "I'm driving for Krishna's sake." But if you drive recklessly and you meet with the accident, at material levels, actions have consequences. So, Krishna did not overlook Bhishma's wrong choices just because he was a devotee. But Krishna did not also neglect Bhishma's devotion just because he made some wrong choices. And ultimately, he was supremely successful in departing. So at ethical level, both Bhishma and Karna made questionable choices. But what made their destiny very different was, at a devotional level, Karna turned away from Krishna and Bhishma remained devoted to Krishna. So, should we stop now? Okay. Yes, please. There's a question. Yeah, please. We determine our destiny. Okay, so that's a good point. That are the two really separate? Because free will also creates some situations. Well, let's look at some examples to illustrate this point. Let's say suppose somebody is driving a car. Now, destiny, we could say something like a weather forecast. So the weather forecast is that there are going to be heavy rain, there are going to be rains and even snow. So then what happens is, the circumstance that we are going to encounter while driving, that maybe the road will the vision will be blurred, the road will be slippery, maybe the internet will not be working. All that is determined by destiny. But how we drive is up to us. We can drive slowly and safe. We can drive fast. Maybe that turns out to be reckless, even disastrous. So our situations, are they determined by destiny? Well, yes. We say, are our situations also determined by decisions? Well, That's not entirely untrue. But what we're talking about is certain situations are independent of our decisions. Suppose we had already started on a drive before we came to know that the weather is going to turn bad. Now we are already on the road and there is no town or village, nowhere where we can pull over. We are on that road. So that situation has not come by our conscious decision. We are there. But what we do in that situation matters. Let's take another example to illustrate this. It's like a tennis match. In life, in the tennis match, sometimes the player is serving and sometimes the player is returning. Actually, they're always serving. They're serving the game of tennis, but something is called as a serve. So now, relatively speaking, when the player is serving, the player has much more control. Much more control. And serve the other player's forehand, backhand, into the body, at what height, what speed, everything is under the control. Now, for the player who is returning, there is very little under control. Wherever the ball comes, they have to get the racket there and get the ball back into play. So, relatively speaking, the control for the person who is serving is more. But time changes. After some time, the person who is returning will be serving, and the person who is serving will be returning. So, similarly, we can say for us, in our lives, there are some times when we are serving. That means there is a lot in our control. There's a lot determined by our decisions. And what is determined by destiny is relatively less. But there are some situations when there is very little determined by us, and a lot is determined by destiny. Say a player is returning, and the opposite player is like an ace machine. Bam, 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 just serving aces. And what can you do except watch at that? If you can just try to hold your serve and wait till a tie break or something like that. So sometimes very little is enough. But there are times when more is enough. So it's never 100%. Everything is by decisions, everything is by circumstances. Reality is complex. But there are, in principle, we can say that there are certain things, certain times, more is enough. Say, for example, this talk. Now, when I was giving the talk, you could say I was serving. Not in the devotional sense, and the tennis sense I'm talking about right now. That I chose the topic, I chose the examples, I chose the flow. But after the class gets over, when I'm answering questions, at that time I'm returning. I can't control which question is going to be asked. Even if I control, this person asks very difficult questions, I won't give the mic to this person. Even if I decide that, but even the other person, people might also ask difficult questions. So at that time, it is not my control. So then I am returning. So like that in our lives, there are some situations where more depends on our decisions. And there are some situations where more depends on destiny. But overall, both of them are. So the exact range of what is what, of which has how much role, that will vary from situation to situation. But the principle is that there are very few situations where everything is determined by destiny. And there are very few situations where everything is determined by decisions. Both work together. But when I put it separately, that is just for us to understand. Okay. There's one question. Yes. Okay. Yes, now another question. Krishna? Oh. Yeah, we'll discuss today. So any other question about this topic? Then we'll stop. Yes.
I don't know much about many things. But that heaven and earth all the same life. Or there is a different concept there.
Okay, so do we experience heaven and earth in this life itself, or is there a different level of existence also? Well, the two are not exclusive. Basically, the idea is the word heaven itself is sometimes used metaphorically. So we go to some place which is very beautiful. We are eating some food which is delicious. This is like heaven. We say that. So the idea is heaven connotes a place of great pleasure. Conversely, hell connotes the place of great misery, great distress. So in that sense, we can experience heaven and hell on earth itself. So having said that, there is also the universe is described in the Bhagavad Gita and the broad Vedic literature to be multi-level. So when people act in ways that are repeatedly irresponsible and destructive, then they are sent in their future life to domains of existence which are corresponding to the kind of actions, which give them the consequences of the actions that they've done. So hell is a place where people who have hurt others grievously throughout their life get the consequences of their actions. And heaven is a place where somebody who has acted, who had done good things, who has acted virtuously, go to a place for getting rewards. So I could say the universe is 3 levels. There's the earth, and above this is the heaven, and below us is below the earth is the hell. But the ultimate goal of life is not even heaven. It is what is the spiritual world. Because even in heaven, the pleasures are temporary. Heaven is for a long time, but even heaven is temporary. So heaven is like going to a hill station resort, something like that. You can go there, but you can stay there only as long as we have money. After that, we'll be evicted. So like that, as long as we have the positive karma, we can be in heaven. Krishna says, "A Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravarti." Even if we go to the highest heavens, we will fall back. But if we go to the spiritual world, that is God's abode, and we go there by developing love for Him. From there, we never return. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Did Karna know that Krishna was God? Good question. 3 things I would say. I'll talk about this past time in later class more. Krishna and Karna's meeting. But Karna was there when Krishna showed his Vishwarupa in Duryodhana's assembly. Karna was there. So he himself saw that display of power. He could have chosen to believe. He could have said, seeing is believing. Show me God. Well, Krishna showed his Godhood. And apparently Karna chose to believe Duryodhana's version, but it's just a display of illusion. So apart from that, Karna also described in their final meeting, she has with Krishna, that he had a dream. And that dream, he sees that the Kauravas are going to be destroyed and he himself is going to be killed by Arjuna. And he says, no, okay, Shiva, what you are saying is going to come true. And the Pandavas are going to be victorious. So that also indicates that he had some understanding that there was some higher things going on. Whether it was specifically Krishna's divinity, that's open to question. See, what happens is accepting divinity is not accepting Krishna's divinity is not just a matter of information or even a matter of intellectual acceptance. It's the acceptance of the heart. So he certainly knew that Krishna was formidable, because that Krishna had killed many, many demons. Right from his childhood was known. That Krishna had lifted Govardhan was also known to him. That is not a hidden past. Bhishma talks about it. On the 4th day of the Kurukshetra war to Duryodhana. So that time Karna was also there. Karna also heard about it. So Bhishma repeatedly proclaimed Krishna's divinity. So when we talk about know, what do we mean? In terms of information, surely he knew about it. Because Bhishma speaks it repeatedly to Duryodhana in Karna's presence. But in terms of acceptance, that's open to question. If he had really accepted Krishna as God, then he would also accept that Krishna is my well-wisher. And doing Krishna's will is in my best interest. So that he did not do. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Gaur Premanande. Calendar is also there. Can I speak about this? Can I speak about this? Yeah, 1 minute.
Everyone can remain seated.
I have written a few books.
Prabhuji has
Yes.
announcement about literature that you can avail yourself of.
Now, I have written a few books. Srila Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavad Gita as it is, in which he explained how bhakti is the conclusive and unifying thread of the Bhagavad Gita. So I have tried to explain that, elaborate that further, based on these two books. Each of them has 100 articles. This is the relation Bhagavad Gita. It explains the Gita in terms of the Krishna-Arjuna relationship and the sweetness, what are Krishna's thoughts and emotions, Arjuna's thoughts and emotions when they are discussing various themes in the Gita. So this can help us to see many of the stories that are discussed in the Mahabharata. This links the Bhagavad Gita with the Mahabharata through various stories and concepts. This Bhagavad Gita Insights, which talks about when we approach the Gita from a rational perspective, how can we understand? So something like, what is destiny? Does God control everything? Or what exactly will it mean when say everything is Maya? Or if we are to be detached, how can we not become irresponsible or heartless? So those kind of concepts of the Gita are explained clearly through these 100 articles. There are about 80 illustrations which make the concepts clearer. And this is a calendar with 365 quotes inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. Like I said today, destiny determines our situations, we determine our decisions. So quotes like, there are thoughts like that, 365 thoughts, each inspired by a particular verse from the Gita. So all these three things are available outside the table cookies if you would like to have them. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Let's appreciate this praise Chaitanya Charan for the wonderful result. Thank you very much this is speaking about how it seems to be situations which may create doubt in our heart. Shastra. Understand higher understand what the Shastras and speak to us. And so, Prashadam